Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the Simple Car Guy channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about 5 ways of keeping your BMW reliable. Now, BMW is one of the most sought after premium brands in the world, blending the power, performance with the sporty appeal. BMWs are also sophisticated and classy, which is pretty much everything you'd want in a car. However, BMW is a part of the, fellow German car brands, which mostly focus on performance and maybe the style and the look, which can come at a compromise of reliability. So if you're a BMW owner, tell us how you keep your BMW reliable down below in the comments. My very first suggestion to keep your car reliable is to do your research. Either before you buy the car or if you already purchased the car, do your research. Research all of the common issues and the problems that you can expect with the car. How much is it going to cost you to fix those things? How common are those problems? Things like that. Those are so important to know when you have a car like this. And also, don't buy a car that's neglected and don't let your car become neglected. You have to take care of these cars. They're very finicky in a way where you have to do correct maintenance. You have to realize that BMWs cost more to maintain. So if you're looking for one, make sure you budget the maintenance of these cars. You have to realize that each one of these cars were $60,000 to $80,000 new. So you can't expect the maintenance to be the same cost as your standard $20,000, $30,000 Toyota or Honda. Yes, you may purchase one of these now for around $20,000, $25,000, but that doesn't mean that the maintenance is going to be the same cost as a $20,000 car. So you really have to concentrate on that and make sure you actually understand how much it's going to cost you in the future and put that in your budget. So I guess my first point is to make sure you get an informed decision. Get a pre-purchase inspection. Best way to have a reliable car is to get one that's been taken care of, not something that's been neglected and the cheapest on cars.com or something or on Craigslist. Get one that's been well maintained and it'll cost you way less in the future. Trust me, I know. For example, I had to change an engine in this one just because I thought it was going to be a simple fix when I bought it at auction with mechanical issues. If you're not willing to keep up with maintenance, BMW may not be the best choice for you. My second suggestion to keeping a BMW reliable is to keep it stock. If you want your car to stay reliable, skip the performance mods and concentrate on maybe suspension, brakes, visual modifications. As you can see in this car, I have the wheels, the spoiler, a few other things. I actually have a video about all of the modifications I've done to this car. You can check that out in the description or the little card that pops up here. But in general, I would avoid doing a lot of the engine and performance modifications unless you really know what you're doing. It's really easy to go ahead and purchase one of those JB4 or whatever they're called mod chips, basically, where you can plug in and you increase the boost and do a lot of other performance modifications, which is great. I mean, the car's going to perform a lot better and all that, but you have to also realize that when you increase the power on the engine, you're also decreasing the lifespan. So if you're going to lease a car and own it for a couple of years, you want to sell off, sure, go ahead and have fun. But if it's something that you want to keep for long term, like this car, I want to keep this car for the next 5, 10 years. I'm not thinking of selling it, So I'm not going to be modifying the engine too much. I'll maybe, increase the power by 10%, but I'm not going to be going for 400 horsepower on a 2-liter engine. Something else I would suggest as far as engine goes in these cars is disabling the start and stop function, especially on the early versions of that feature. My 550, that function works really well. On this older car, so this is a 2012, but I believe it's the same from 2009 to 2013, and then they kind of upgrade that function. It's not really the best, and it's actually fairly damaging to the engine and to the starter. I know there's a lot of pros and cons to this. Yes, you can save some fuel, but you're really wearing out some of the important and expensive parts when it comes to these early first generation auto start and stop function. Number 3, you must follow maintenance schedule for the items suggested in your service manual. Both of these cars came with a service manual that shows you exactly what kind of stuff you need to be doing at which mile or year intervals. One thing that's an exception here is that you should be changing oil way more often than what the BMW suggests. They're telling you 10 or 15,000 miles. That's ludicrous. Don't listen to that. You should be changing oil on your cars, I would say 5, maximum 7,000 miles for each one of these cars. They're direct injected, turbocharged cars. You need to have good, fresh oil. Also, in the case of the 550, it actually burns a little bit of oil as you're driving, and it's normal. So if you go 15,000 miles or even 10,000 miles between oil changes, you will burn about 2 quarts of oil on this V8, which can be good for the engine, and you don't want to be starving the engine of any oil. So change your oil often. It's really easy, it's not that expensive, and if you do it yourself, it's really cheap, and it will save your engine in the future. Of course, if you have a more unique car, such as a BMW Z4, it may have extra maintenance or additional maintenance that you may not have to do on a car such as this. In this case would be roof maintenance. This car requires yearly or even semi-yearly roof maintenance that will prevent a lot of really expensive issues. I actually have a video on how to maintain the roof properly, so I do suggest you check that video out if you have a convertible. You don't want to be skipping on that kind of service. It may be really, really expensive at the dealer because they have to, lubricate and do a lot of other things as far as the roof goes. But the good thing is that you can do that yourself for really cheap, really cheap. I mean, it cost me less than $30 to maintain the entire roof, and then additional maybe $40 for some preventative maintenance, where I had to swap out some salmon relays in order not to have issues with the pump and hydraulic issues with the roof. That brings me nicely to preventative maintenance. And preventative maintenance is key on most BMWs. When certain parts run past their expiration or expected life, it's time to change them, and change them proactively. Also, make sure you buy quality parts. Don't buy super cheap knockoff parts from eBay. I've done that mistake, and I actually have a video about that where I purchased a $20 sensor that pretty much screwed everything up. So check that video out. But go for OEM spark plugs, go for OEM coils. They may not necessarily have to be BMW branded, but they should at least be, let's say, Bosch or whatever, brands that BMW actually uses to produce their parts. You want your engine to operate the best it can. So it's a really good idea to change air filters, let your engine breathe, change your spark plugs, ignition coils, maybe even a thermostat. Look out for any oil filter housing leaks or valve cover leaks. Check out your charge pipe. Make sure there's no leaks or cracks in that. It's really important that these engines get enough air and fuel and don't get starved of that. As soon as you start seeing any kind of leaks, change those gaskets as soon as possible, especially if those leaks are around the oil filter gasket or the valve cover gasket. You definitely don't want your engine to start of oil, and those aren't that expensive to fix. I actually do have a video on how to replace the head cover, not the head cover, the valve cover gasket on the N20 engine. So you can check one of those out. It takes about 2 hours, so not too bad if you do it yourself. If your car is running over 100,000 miles, it might be a good idea to look into more complicated items, such as the timing chain or the timing chain tensioner. Those are really important to maintain and replace if needed, which will prevent you from some catastrophic failures within the engine. Some of the other preventative maintenance items that I like to do on my cars is to use touchless or brushless car washes. Now this isn't something that you have to do, but I really like the idea of getting all the salt in the winter and the grime and dirt in the summer off of your car. It will allow your car to be, first of all, cleaner. You won't have to wax and polish and all that stuff your paint as much, but also it'll prevent rust in the future. If you leave a lot of salt underneath of your car and drive the car for a year without washing it or something, it will start rusting from the bottom, and it's not something you want in your car. It'll cause a lot of other issues other than structural issues. Also, I would suggest applying leather conditioner every 3 to 6 months if you have leather in your car, and most BMWs have leather or leatherette type of stuff in the car, so it's a good idea to condition that as well. Don't forget to also lubricate your rubber parts. That way, all these rubber parts don't crack, don't let water in. You don't want any kind of water getting into the car, getting into the electronics, causing a lot more issues than you want. For the same reason, I would never buy a flood car unless you have a lot of time in your hands and would like to be changing sensors and wiring harnesses for years to come. Of course, there are some good ones, but in general, it's a big hassle. I've also seen a lot of leaves and stuff that build up in some of these runoff channels. Clean those out as well. You don't want, that water backing up and going places where it's not supposed to. So those are some of the preventative maintenance items that I like to do on my cars. Different cars will vary, but it's a good start. Number 4 on my list, learn how to work on your own car. And I realize that it's not possible for everyone. If you live in an apartment or, have a situation where you're not allowed to work on your own car, that's one thing. But for everyone else, it's something you should be proud of, something you can say, yes, I fixed my own car, I did all the maintenance myself. And I'm that way. I'm really proud that I do all of the work and all of the maintenance on all of my cars. Not only do I get a sense of accomplishment when I fix an issue myself, I also save a ton of money by not going to the dealer or any other shop. Some people will say that getting a mechanic's toolbox is really expensive, but it doesn't have to be. I actually have a video of all of the tools that I use to work on all of my cars, and it probably didn't cost me more than, I don't know, $500. And that includes some, BMW specific tools that I use for changing the timing chain and things like that. So if you shop around, if you only buy the tools that you need as you need them, it's not that expensive. One tool you will definitely need working on a BMW is a good BMW scanner. At this time, I have 3 different scanners, and they all kind of do a different function. I have a slightly cheaper one at $20, $25 that will just read the codes, reset the code, and let you see live data. Those are great to just keep in your car. I also have a Creator C501, I believe. And that one's great for seeing a lot more of the BMW specific items, BMW specific codes, and things like that. And then I have a more advanced Autel AP200 scanner that allows me to actually program the injectors, register a battery, um, adjust the idle speed, different things like that. So I do suggest getting, maybe the most expensive one out of the list that I just mentioned, which was about $60, $70. Or if you don't want to spend that much until the time that you actually need it, you can get some of the cheaper ones. But at least that way you can see what the issue is when something happens, and you don't have to, pay the dealer to diagnose your car. You can do it yourself. And once you learn how to work on your own car, you can actually start doing some of the modifications that I mentioned earlier. Now, you don't have to go crazy and do a lot of power add-on type of modifications, but you can do a lot of aesthetic mods that will make the car look better. And that's not something you would take the car to a dealer for. They're probably not going to be installing, spoiler, a trunk spoiler like I have for your car. And now we arrive at number 5. And the best suggestion I can give you for keeping these cars reliable is to drive it. Don't let your car sit in the garage and become garage queens. It's not what these cars are made for. They're made to be driven. Of course, if you have to store a car, such as a convertible, and you live in Canada or something over winter, make sure you take the preventative maintenance and proper procedures to store a car like this. At the very minimum, make sure you fill it up with fresh gas, you put it on a trickle charger. You have to realize that these cars will use some power even while they're just sitting and doing nothing, which will drain your battery over time. This, of course, will also put unnecessary stress on your battery and the alternator. Once you start, using the car, the battery is not going to be holding the charge as much, so the alternator will have to work more, and it just kind of cascades from there. So you have to really take proper precautions when you aren't driving these cars. But of course, it's a lot easier to just drive the cars. You also have to realize that most fluids that these cars are using have a lifetime. So even if you're not driving your car a lot, you have to still change your oil, maybe your brake fluid, and whatever else, that comes up on your maintenance schedule. You can't just say, okay, I only drive 2,000 miles a year, so I don't have to change anything. You still have to maintain the car, even if it sits. Enjoy your car. Don't let it sit. It's not gonna maintain any more value by sitting in your garage and you not driving it. So enjoy it, put some miles on it. It's just not worth keeping it in the garage. So in conclusion, make sure you do your research. You find a good car, you buy a car that's been already properly maintained before it gets into your hands. Also, look up videos on problems to expect for the specific car that you're buying, and I'm sure you're gonna find plenty of information. Consider that information before you actually buy the car. And if you already purchased the car, know how to fix it. See how expensive it is. Maybe do some preventative maintenance. It's also really important to make sure that you change the oil often, and I mean often, at least every 5,000 miles. Use expensive gas. Don't use the cheap stuff. Make sure it's high octane. These cars hate anything under 95, 91 octane here in the US. I know it's a little bit different there in Europe. Of course, there are certain items that you can't really control, such as the cheap plastics that they've been using on some of these cars. As an example, this BMW N20 engine has very cheap and brittle plastic that was used in the timing chain guides, um, which is something that you probably should know before you purchase the car. And that's why it's really important to make sure you do your research. That way you can look into the history of the car and see, was that item replaced? Is this something that I have to plan on replacing within 10, 20, 30, or 50,000 miles? That's really important information for you to know before you purchase the car or even after you've purchased the car. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope it helps you keep your BMWs reliable and on the road for a very long time. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.